Hey everyone, how's it going? Shuffle's back here with another video, and it is finally time. I've been getting asked about this every day for the last probably month now. When is the next tier list coming out? It has been 3 months. We are ready for Q4 of 2020. So here we are. You can see at the very bottom, actually, first, before we get into this, the same thing I say before every tier list is one, if you want a picture of the list, it will be posted on the Discord on Wednesday. Today being, well, you're seeing this video on Sunday. So 3 days from now, I'm going to post it on the Discord in the resources section, so you can check that out if you want to. Also, this list is all encompassing, so not just PvP. It does encompass the entire game. I do go through each individual unit and rate them. We're only doing 4 stars and above this list. Next list, what I'm going to do is I'm going to exclude characters from D, C, and potentially B ranks because they're only 4 and 5 stars. So all these units you can see now will not be on the list, excluding Crow. But we will be including the 3-star specialty changes that make the cut. So very important. I know a lot of people have wanted that. The only way I can do that and keep that in a normal amount of time is if we take some champions out. So we're going to take out the Xenos and the Elfelts of the world, and we're going to put in more of the units that you guys care about. So hopefully you guys appreciate that. And of course, these are based on not only my views, but a lot of other Legend players' views as well. And it does tend to lead toward late game. So if you are early game, there are units that would be useful and maybe would be ranked higher for you that really just aren't as useful late game. And I will try and explain each of them along the way. But for now, let's just jump right into the video. Leading off here at the bottom with Crow. We are going to come back to him. I don't want to talk about him right now. I'm going to try and talk about him when we get to his perceived spot in terms of the light units. So if you want to hear about him, stay tuned for him a little closer to the end, as he will be near the top of the list, but not at the very top. Moving on, we will jump right into the D ranks. Of course, Xeno, not much to say here. He doesn't really get used anywhere. He does have great base speed, but that's really about it. Zerato does have a stun. You could potentially use him. Wait, maybe he doesn't even have a stun. I'm pretty sure he has a stun. But honestly, don't build him. There's just better units out there that you can use. There's no situation where he's the best option unless you're really late game and really bored with a lot of extra resources. You're better off just not building him. Up next, we have Mercedes. Basically the same thing. People keep expecting her to get a specialty change. Hasn't happened yet. She's a 4-star though, so I don't know what they're going to do with her. Maybe they give her an exclusive, but I don't know. Corvus, very similar. Really no place in the game anymore. They went from him being terrible to overbuffing him and then nerfing him back to the ground again. There's no reason for you to use this unit. If you didn't recall him, I'm sorry. But there's just better units out there. Up next, Haste, probably the unit most called for in the community for a buff. He really needs it. He was so good back before you had to be a single element for Wyvern, but now he just doesn't really have place. He can be used for Golem because he does have a heal block, but realistically, late game, you're not farming Golem. You really shouldn't be farming it early game either, but a lot of people insist on it. So he gets stuck down here at D tier alongside Maya, who really doesn't have a place other than imprinting Fighter Maya. Quazu, honestly, I can't even tell you what he does. That's how little he gets used. Kazuna, actually not terrible for an early game unit. Like, she was free, they gave her away. She's got some use early game wise. She can actually heal, but her base speed is so bad that she's really not something like they need to give her base speed just to get her to D rank. I probably shouldn't even have her this high, but I didn't have a rank below D. And then Elfelt. Elfelt's still broken. I don't know what's wrong with her. Her damage is very similar to like a Maid Chloe, who is a reviver. There's no reason for her damage to be as bad as it is. Even with attack buff and defense break, she can't kill anybody. It's kind of embarrassing that they haven't fixed her yet. I don't know what's wrong. It feels like her skill is just bugged because her kit is decent. I would actually use somebody with her kit if she could do any damage, but she really just can't. Moving on, Cartusia. He's gotten a couple of buffs now, but he's still not getting used, so he's in here at D rank. I'm not going to spend any more time on any of those units. If you're building them, I hope you're really bored and have a lot of extra resources, because there's really no need to other than that. Moving on up to C rank. Let's use this, make it a little smoother. All right, on to the C rank. Starting with water, we have Water Collie, another unit that I wouldn't be surprised if she gets a specialty change, or not a special change. She gets an exclusive equipment at some point. She kind of could be good, but she's just not as good as Assassin Collie, and Assassin Collie is an ML, so why would you not use her? You could use her potentially for Wyvern, but also no debuffs, so that kind of rules her out for there. Really no reason to build Collie either. Clarissa could actually be used technically as a farmer, but really no reason to build a farmer in this game. You'll already have something that you're using in PvP that you can use for farming. The only reason really to build her would be for Wyvern, and she does have a defense break with her skill 1 and can be used from early game all the way through late game in Wyvern if you really want to. She just doesn't have the best skill 1 defense break, so I don't recommend it, but you can do it if you want to. Crozet up next. He is another one that can be used for Wyvern. Probably not best in slot. I do know that some people are using him to make 3-man Wyvern teams later because they don't want to use their purchase for Wyvern anymore, and they're finding that maybe he's a little more stable for a Wyvern 3-man team than General Purchases. I still don't recommend building him. If you already have a General Purchase built, I mean, unless you're trying to, like, if you're whaling heavily for energy, there's really no point to upgrade your Wyvern 13 tank. I just don't see it. But if you want to, you can do that. Next, we have Roman. Roman's actually a pretty good strip and could debatably be higher than this, but being water, because there's so many element neutral strips now with Benevolent Roman and with Izaria, and even if you want to look at somebody like a Basar who is an element neutral but he's just better, Harado as well, there's just so many better strips than him. There's really no reason to use Roman unless you're just trying to catch people off guard and want to use something that's off meta. Up next, we have Calrick. Calrick's another one similar to Elfelt, whose damage just wasn't up to snuff. Like, they were so afraid of putting out a unit that was overpowered that they severely underpowered him. His skill 3 damage is, or I don't remember if it's a skill 3 or a skill 2, whichever one it was. The AoE damage is so bad. A lot of people, myself included, thought because it was speed-based damage, it was going to scale really well. Unfortunately, it did not. And he's basically useless at this point. Again, unless you're trying to catch people off guard, you could force use him. Regular era, kind of the same idea. There's a lot of people that do what she does, and you could build her if you want to, but there's better out there, and really no reason to build her. Dingo, same sort of idea. He's actually a decent bruiser, though. I think there was a time when people were using him quite a bit, but I haven't, even since RTA's come out, I haven't seen him a single time in RTA. Although if you could build him and probably catch some people off guard, if you're willing to take some of your best gear off of a really good unit and put it onto him, which I don't recommend. But if you're trying to just have fun in RTA, go for it. Cyrilla, another one. She has no use in the game right now. Other than her art, a lot of people think that she has a great personality. So try and build her up if you want to. But I would err on the side of caution as she doesn't really do much once she is leveled up. Kiwana, another one that could be interesting. She pairs very well with a lot of fire units. Unfortunately, there's not a reason to bring a lot of fire units, and if you're bringing a lot of fire units in a team in PvP, you're going to get destroyed because there's still a lot of really good water units out there. The only reason you would build her up is maybe for an all-fire raid team, which could potentially work, and potentially for Golem again, but again, Golem, really no reason to be farming it. So I would steer clear of her, at least for now. She could be somebody to keep an eye on later on, though, as the game evolves, as maybe Fire becomes really strong and then she becomes OP. So maybe she'll get a chance at some point. I would keep a triple S version of her in your inventory, just in case at some point you want it. Up next is Saul. I know a lot of people use him for PvE. Again, somebody else. Why Golem really strong, but you don't need him anywhere else. There's no way he deserves to be any higher than this. in terms of late game progression, he's not going to help you. He's a great early free 6-star that if you were playing when he came out, but other than that, there's no need for him. Up next, we have Green Armin. I actually thought about bringing her up a tier. She's kind of on the cusp, but she's just not getting any use anymore. She was for a little bit in Guild War, but now she's kind of fallen back down again. Her mystique is over, and people have gone back to some of the more traditional tanks, especially since recently we've gotten some really good ones, and those that didn't have the really good ones now either do or they have some of the new ones. So really no reason to build Green Armin because you'll probably never use her. Coming at the same time as Kazuna is Free Spirit Tayeria, another great early game unit, but falls off really heavily as you get later in the game. I wouldn't, like, she's a decent farmer early, but I wouldn't bother leveling her up or moling her or anything like that, unless you want to get that little thing off the corner of your to-do list, which I did just because it was annoying me. But that's really the only thing you should be doing with her. Up next, we have Leo, and Roaming Warrior Leo did just get a buff, and unfortunately, it didn't move him up the tier list. His buff let him detonate bombs. Unfortunately, he only detonates one bomb, and his bombs are AoE, so detonating one bomb doesn't really do you all that much good. If he was detonating all bombs, then maybe you could make him work, but I think just with one detonation, it's not enough. And I don't think his bomb detonation or his bombs are actually that powerful, so we'll have to see. Again, another unit I have not seen even one time in RTA. All right, let's move up to the B tier. Now we're starting to get units that you could actually justify a reason for building without them just being out of boredom. Up first, we have Sez. Sez is still a hard-hitting damage dealer, but there's just way better out there. And being a squishy damage dealer, he should really have something else, I guess, to his kit. I don't know if he needs a buff, but I think he's just at the bottom tier of where he is, and that's fine. Up next, we have regular Dominielle. She does have a damage reflect and an AoE freeze, which is really interesting. She can be really scary in the right comp if you're running crowd control comps. Again, though, not being element neutral for a crowd control unit, because element neutrality is so overwhelmingly strong in this game, does make her a little harder to use. But against the right comp, she can be very productive. Up next, we have Furious. Furious is a great Wyvern 13 unit. He has a defense break. He will help you with the defense breaks if you need a reliable one. Other than that, there's really no reason to build him. Same as Kareen. She's kind of in that same spot. I'm sure you could build her in a cleave type setup for RTA if you really wanted to. But again, there's just better. Unless you're using her for Wyvern, I wouldn't build her. And she was actually one of my first 6-stars. I really enjoyed using her. But just not all that much of a use anymore. Onto the fire units, we have Shuri. Shuri is one of the best speed imprints in the game, tied with somebody else who we'll get to later. He does have a 14 speed imprint, so just for that, he gets put on B rank. He doesn't do much else. If you want to use him early game, he has great turn generation. He can help supplement your team's speed if you don't have much, and can help carry you through a lot of content early on. But then later on, you just won't need him anymore, and he's better off being replaced by somebody else. Holiday Euphine, sadly to say, was supposed to be the Bazaar counter. She does do that, but outside of that, she doesn't really bring anything to the table. I know late game people have been trying to force use her as like a counter to evasion units like Rylet by putting Junkyard Dog on her, getting the burns to proc because it doesn't matter. Burns will proc even if you miss. So they've been putting her with a high attack build and like HP-ish substats, having her survive, do her skill 3 to put up greater attack, and then having the burns scale off the greater attack buff, and then can kill a Rylet relatively quickly if you get enough turns. But I just think there's better ways. I really don't think she's that good, and she really doesn't serve any other purpose other than that. So, Cash, just go lay down, buddy. So that's about it for Holiday Euphine. I know some people really like her, but I'm adamantly opposed to that. This is one unit who I refuse to listen to Anybody else's opinion when it comes to her? Because I've tried her out and I've seen her in action. I've never seen her do anything other than counter Basara on first turn, and I wouldn't waste my resources on her, to be honest. I didn't even 6-star her, and I 6-star everything. Moving on to the nature units is Rin. Rin is an interesting one. She did just get an exclusive. I haven't seen anyone use her since she got her exclusive, which I guess says something about that. But she's still solid. You can use her if you want to. Her heal is very small. She does have a defense break though. She's only a healer that I can think of with a defense break, which is kind of nice. But her heal is so small that she's still very hard to use. On to Purchase. Green Purchase is an interesting one because he is very counter cleave. So if you are tanky enough and you can get enough tanky units into your team to keep him alive, he can potentially solo stuff because he can counter AoE stun, similar to a Dizzy, except he stuns more often and his damage is actually quite a bit higher. So the only problem is if you're going to try him in RTA, it's really difficult because you're sacrificing damage reduction. It's not like Arena where in Arena you can bring Aureus and Adamant and nobody can ban one of them. If you bring Purchase into RTA, they're just going to ban either your Aureus or your Adamant, and then they're just going to kill your Purchase. So kind of tricky, but for Arena defense, he can be decent. Other than that, not really a use. Up next, we have regular Lots. Lots is actually a decent healer and has a great attack bar boost a la Oxlots, except he has no attack buff. So he's great with Sermia. Every time I've ever seen him, he's been paired with Sermia. Other than that, probably not worth. He's not bad, but he's not great either. Build him if you have a specific reason in mind for him. If you don't have a specific use case for him or a specific team comp for him, I wouldn't recommend building him. Up next, we have Leo. Leo's another one. He's steadily risen up this tier list, despite the fact that I'm not personally a fan of him. I had him at D rank 2 quarters ago. Last quarter, I had him at C, and this quarter, I moved him up to B rank. I do see a little bit of him here and there. A lot of people are at least trying to use him, which is more than I can say for a lot of the units in C tier. So he moves up to the B tier. I still won't be building him anytime soon, but he's got some interesting use cases if you want to try him out. Next, and one of our final B tier units is going to be Bellano. Now, I know a lot of people are fans of regular Bellano, and I think she's really good, but I think she's really good early. And then she has this steep decline because she's so hard to use later in the game. Yes, she has an AoE defense break, but it really just doesn't translate late game. She's very difficult to use. You can use her in speedruns for hunts, but there's also a lot of other units you can use in speedruns for hunts. So you could argue she should be a little higher, maybe have her A rank. I needed to move somebody down into this rank, so she was the casualty, and I don't know how I feel about it. She's still good though. If you want to use her for speedruns, you already know what you're doing, and you're not looking at a tier list to see where she's ranked on the list, which is kind of part of the reason why she falls down this far, is because she's very niche and doesn't really have many PvP uses, and everything in PvE can be done with multiple characters. Moving on, we have Ludwig. Ludwig is a really hard-hitting damage dealer, and he can do a lot of things, but in order for him to be that good, he has to have some of your best gear. And if you're putting your best gear on him, that means you're not putting it on one of the best units in the game who would do a lot more for you. So you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot if you're building up Ludwig to be that strong, because he won't do very well on average gear, and that gear is just better off on somebody else. So although he can perform really well, he can also kind of debilitate your account if you just don't have a ton of overwhelmingly good gear. So that's where we're going to leave it for Ludwig. On to Silk. Silk, I think, is underappreciated because she's a free unit that you get really early. She does have an AoE slow, and AoE slow is one of the most debilitating debuffs in the game. I haven't seen her at all in RTA, and I kind of would love to make a team with her. I just don't know how I would do it, which kind of suggests why she's at this rank. But with a team speed buff and enemy slow debuff, you could just take turns for days if you were to land it. I think with really good gear, she could be a lot of fun. But as of now, nobody's using her, and not really many places in the game. Even if she does get used in that situation, it's very niche, and it would only work one time because people would see it coming and they would counter it. But for that one time, it would be a hell of a lot of fun. All right, moving up, we are on to the A rank. Um, let's go with the water units first. First up, we have regular Chloe. She did just have her side story. She got an exclusive. She's got I don't think she got a buff, but they've kind of wanted her to be good, and they keep pushing her. She just doesn't really have a place right now. She was really good for Wyvern. She does have one debuff and can potentially defense break with her skill 3, but unless you're perfectly speed tuning like a speed team or something with her, she's probably not your best choice for Wyvern. And outside of that, although she does have one of the best skill 3 burn multipliers in the game, you're probably not using her anywhere. I do really like her though. She's got a cool kit. Her exclusives are actually really good. She can have a strip with her skill 2 before she puts up nail, or she can have a defense break on skill 3. I think she's really, really good. Unfortunately, that nail doesn't scale very well anywhere outside Wyvern. It's really only good for PvE, so you don't see her used all that much. But she is an interesting unit, and she does a lot of damage if she's skilled up and you burn into it. That skill multiplier on skill 3 is insane. I have seen her used a couple times in RTA, but maybe, you never know. Maybe we'll see her get used a little bit more. Up next, we have Kize. Kize's another one, used to be the Wyvern Queen because she ripped through that shield. Now nobody's waiting for the shield to go up, so she kind of fell off. She did get a buff that gives her stealth, and I think she could be very good in RTA, and she is a unit that I would use in RTA, except she's very similar to Spectre Tenebria with the stealth, except Spectre can't get knocked out of stealth, so since I have Spectre, I don't really use Kize. But I do think if you don't have Spectre, you could use Kize in that role as sort of like a nuker that can't be touched. You could use her like against single target teams, and you'd be really well off. But that's kind of the only place I see her being used. Next, we have Rose. Rose is a great tank. She definitely has a place in RTA. She's being used quite a bit recently in RTA, and I really enjoy her. That being said, she's also relatively easily countered, and if you see it coming, you're good to go. She's very one-dimensional in that regard. That's really the only place you would use her. But that's going to be it for her. She is very good, and if you're trying to do late game RTA, like Legend RTA, she's a great option in that hole. She gives you kind of another dimension, another option for your offenses, but you won't use her anywhere else, so keep that in mind. Up next, we have Angelica. Angelica is one of the only pure healers left in the game. One of the only healers that doesn't have a cleanse. She does have immunity, which is nice. I haven't seen her used by anybody outside of early game, though, in a long time. So she is potentially the best early game healer, but late game she falls off hard. Her base speed is really low. I kind of think she needs an exclusive for her base speed, but then maybe she's overpowered for early game content. I'm not sure. That's why I'm not the dev. But she is still a very good unit, and I can't drop her any lower than this just because of how helpful she is in the spots where she is useful. Yuna, Water Ranger, free unit. She has gotten a buff. She's gotten exclusives. She's got, you name it, they've given it to her. They want her to be useful. I have seen her used a little bit recently, more recently in RTA than she has been previously. Outside of that, she doesn't really have much use. But in RTA, there have been a few people using her as a booster or as a CDOM boost. It's been kind of interesting to see different implementations of her. I've also seen her as a damage dealer with drink. She's still difficult to use, and you need really good gear quality in order to make it work. But you can make her work and have a lot of fun with it. So she's definitely worth if you have the gear to make her work. Up next is Luna. Luna's a strange unit as well. She's kind of in an in-between spot where she used to be amazing for Wyvern. You're noticing a theme here with these water units. Used to be amazing for Wyvern, but now that you need debuffs, she's fallen off the planet. She really needs some sort of a buff or exclusive or something in order to be useful again. She Her one true place is still the fact that her skill 1 has no debuffs, and that she does help with that sort of content in things like Abyss, where there are floors where you need a damage dealer who doesn't do debuffs, and without someone like Luna, it can be very tricky. Moving on to fire, we will start with Melissa. Melissa's a strange unit in that when she does what she does it very well. And she did just recently get a buff where she can ignore resistance, which is really nice. People were hoping she was going to counter Rylet, and she kind of does, except Rylet's base speed is so good that he just outspeeds Melissa's and one-shots them. So she doesn't really counter them unless you bring some sort of a buffer. I know there's some players out there that use her, but it doesn't really translate as well the later you get in game. She's very interesting on like a Guild War defense. I know there were some top guilds that were using her on Guild War defense. I don't know if they still are necessarily. I know I haven't seen any recently. But with the strip and the curse and then another attack, she can do huge damage. So if you're looking for a very hard-hitting fire unit, she's definitely one of the better ones out there in terms of pure damage. So keep that in mind. Moving on, speaking of pure damage dealers that are fire, we have Sermia. And I know a lot of people hate the fact that I have Sermia this low. I actually had her in B tier until this quarter. This is the first time I've moved her up to A tier. It's the highest she's ever been. And she didn't even get a buff, so hopefully all you Sermia lovers are a little happier now. I can't justify bringing her any higher just because she is a fire unit, she is single target, and other than just purely her damage, she doesn't bring much else to the table. When you compare her to a certain water ranger, a certain light ranger that we haven't gotten to yet, who does big single target damage, and he also has a speed imprint and he's element neutral, Sermia is just, there's no reason to put that gear on Sermia unless you don't have him. But she is good at what she does. If you're looking for a very hard hitting fire damage dealer, maybe you're having a hard time dealing with Charles in Guild War, and you need a unit just to delete him on first turn so you can go on with your fight, she's a great option. Next, we have Firelitica. Firelitica, very strong first turn unit, insane base speed, one of the highest base speeds in the game, and you can use her to control things like Basar. If you want to just take Basar to the fight, you run Litiga and you're good to go. The problem with her, and the reason she's not higher on this list, is one, because she gets resisted, and two, because your top speed gear probably isn't on her. So you need to have, in order to use her properly, you need to have enough speed gear that you have 2 or 3 speed units geared, and you still have enough speed gear left over to put on her. And that's kind of why she's tricky right now. I'm sure she'll get used a little bit more later on when people have more of the same gear. Like for me, I've been saying that it's not that I need better gear, I just need more of what I already have so I can gear more units, especially as more units come out. Up next, we have Cern, and I did move Cern up on this list, and if you've been watching my streams on Twitch, at twitch.tv/fivefingershuffle, you know why I've been using her. She is the only unit in the game that has a speed imprint and can deal with RB. So if you're cleaving, and you're worried about getting outsped, Cern is one of your go-to options. You can bring her with Oxlots, and then it's very hard to outspeed her because she has a 14 speed imprint, similar to Shuri, but she also does damage. And if you gear her up, which I've been doing, and I've been using it in Legend RTA against Legend RTA players, Oxlots into Cern, I had a fight yesterday where I went first against an Assassin Sid and a Broman, and my Oxlots boosted the Cern, and I burned into the Cern. I killed both the Assassin Sid and the Broman on first turn with her. And then the very next fight, I fought an Arbiter Vildred, and she one-shot the Arbiter Vildred as well, both times. So very good unit, and with the 14 speed imprint, she just can't be replaced in those kind of comps if you're worried about being outsped. Sometimes speed imprints are good, like a lot of times I'll just bring Shuri, But if it's like somebody like an Assassin Sid where he's got insane base speed and he's probably faster than me if I don't bring an imprint, and you want to be safe, going Cern is a good option. Moving over to the nature units, we have Moi, and this is her first appearance on the list, and actually, oh no, we had Euphine. Yeah. So other than Euphine, this is the second first appearance on the list so far. She's an interesting unit. She's got a strip, she's got a stun, both AoE. I think her place is in crowd control comps and crowd control comps only. So if you like running crowd control comps with like Dizzy, ML Era, Moi, Basar, that kind of thing, this is your girl. Because if they let both strips through, she can then stun right away, which is really nice. Instead of having two strips, one of which doesn't stun, they could just ban. They can just leave your second one in, and then you're kind of short a unit, and you're trying to 3v4. So she's a great option there. Outside of that, I don't see it. I haven't seen her used successfully in a comp other than that ever, and I tested her out quite heavily, but it just didn't really work. Like, you can't really use her as a booster in a lot of places because she is nature, and not only can she get resisted, but against fire units she's not going to strip, or if you're trying to use her to CDOM boost, she won't crit. So a lot of problems there and a lot of better options in terms of those. But in terms of running crowd control comp, she's very good at that. Up to Biken. Biken is a nice bridge unit for Cleaves, or the number one option for Banshee one-shot team. So that's really it for her. What I mean by a bridge unit is, say you're running, for example, Cerise and Cdom. Cerise doesn't boost. So say you ran Litiga, Cerise, Cdom, and RTA. The Litiga boosts. If they ban the Litiga and you just have the Cerise, then the Cerise not boosting is an issue. You might get your Cdom a turn and the Cdom boosts, but maybe your fourth unit is relatively slow and won't get a turn. So if you can build your Cdom to one-shot and then the Biken to be able to one-shot and boost that following unit, she's that bridge unit between your Cdom and the following unit. So she can be used for that. But outside of that, she's really just a Banshee unit, and she's very good at what she does. So if you need a Banshee unit, then that's your girl. Next, we have Rowana, and Rowana is the cause of many great debates on our Twitch channel. I really don't like Rowana. I don't understand why she's in so many top-tier arena defenses, and part of me understands why, because they want to prevent SSB auto, and you can do that, but during Rush, not many people are SSB autoing, so I don't know if I really like the idea of running her on arena defense. She can be a good counter if you run her with ML Tywin. She can be a great counter to almost anything because she can't get debuffed either. The problem against SSBs is that SSB also kind of counters her by putting up buff block and heal block, and if those land, then GG. Rowana does nothing. She's basically an empty slot. So comp dependent, she can be very good, but also comp dependent, she can be very bad. So keep that in mind when you're building her. If you're building her, like for me in RTA, if I have SSB in my team, I just ignore Rowana and pretend like she's not there, and I focus on the other three. And usually that's all that matters. Up next, we have Pavel. Pavel got a buff and got used a little bit more, and then he kind of got forgotten about. I'm kind of surprised he didn't get more play after that buff, because he does deal with SSB quite easily now. But I guess to be fair, SSB's kind of dropped a tiny bit in terms of her use rate, so maybe that's why we don't see him as much. He is also squishy, so if he doesn't do his job, it's kind of GG. But yeah, his damage is actually quite good now. If you're looking for a really hard-hitting, fast damage dealer, he's a great option. Then we have Violet. Violet, top-tier unit. He's very, very good, but his counterpart, Rylet, is just so much better. So I don't know if I would bother building him. Unless you don't have Rylet and you need a Nature Bruiser, then you can go for it. He does have great base speed, and he's got a lot of great options, but he's just not as good as some of the other units out there. And there's a lot of bruisers out there right now. Up next, we have Celine. And Celine is an interesting unit. She's either, depending on what she decides to do, she's either like double S or she's an F rank unit. So if you bring her in against an Oxlot's Cleave, that's her place. And against a lot of different cleaves like that, she's got a chance to ruin your day if she's on the enemy team. If she attacks the right unit, then GG. If she attacks the wrong unit, then she just was completely useless. So build her if you want to try and use her to counter Oxlots or CDOM teams. If that's your goal, she can potentially do the job very well, but she can also be a very frustrating unit to use. Moving on to the light units, we have Watcher Shuri, and we talked about Watcher Shuri a little bit when we were talking about Sermia, but Watcher Shuri is just better in that regard. Could actually argue that he should be moved up a rank here, just because he is the same thing, except he has a speed imprint. But once we get up to that next tier, you'll see why he is where he is, because the units above the A tier are like in the OP category. But very strong. He can one-shot anybody. He has 100% ignore defense. He has a skill 2 strip, and he has a 10 speed imprint, all in the same package, and can hold sachet too, so you can build him slow and he'll still get his turn. So all in all, probably the best single target nuker, if that's all you're looking for in the game. General Purchase, the king of Wyvern. He is in 99% of Wyvern teams right now, and there's a good reason. He boosts the entire team. You can build him slow. You can put him on leftover gear. There's a lot going on, and yeah, nothing else to say other than that. You do see him occasionally in anti-cleave setups in RTA, but for the most part, it's just Wyvern. Next up, we have Fighter Maya. Fighter Maya is a great defense scaling unit. She can hit crazy hard. She is somewhat hard to use though, and requires a huge Mola investment in order to be good, and you probably won't use her all that often. So that's kind of where I get stuck with her, is the Molas. I actually have her built, and I have really good gear on her, but I just don't want to Mola her up. And because Molas are still somewhat rare, it's hard to justify building her unless you're really late game. She does have a place in Guild War as a light tank, and you don't have to heavily invest in her for that. If you want to use her for that, she can do that and absorb a lot of attacks and self-cleanse, which is nice. And then in RTA, she scales very, very well if you get to a late frenzied fight. Now you have to get there, but because she's a defense-based unit, her HP decreasing doesn't really have that much of effect, and her damage gets crazy. Like, she can solo teams later in a fight. You just got to get there. Up next, we have Wanderer Silk. Wanderer Silk, another one of the units with some of the best base speed in the game, is with her exclusive now. She also, similar to Flitica, has a single target strip and 100% attack bar reduction, except she's element neutral. So if you want to do what Litiga would do, except you want to do it against a water unit, or I don't know, you want to do something else, you can bring her instead. She's very good. I used her in Raid. She's a lot of fun to play with. Unfortunately, she doesn't do much other than that, so unless you win on first turn, you're probably in trouble. But you could use her to counter things like Assassin Sid or any other of those crazy fast units. Maybe a Broman, if you want to go first over a Broman and reset his attack bar, then you could do that. Then we have Blaze Dingo. Actually, before we switch, Wander Silk, the reason that's a bit of an issue is the same reason as Litiga, is because normally you don't want to put your best speed gear on her. Unless you maybe don't use any speed-based units, then you could do that, but if you do and you have good speed gear, it's usually on like an Oxlots or a Flitica or something like that. Alright, Bingo. Bingo can actually hit crazy hard. If you've ever been Bingo cleaved, you know what I'm talking about. Sometimes people will go Oxlots into Bingo with his greater attack exclusive, and then it'll burn into his skill 3, giving him an extra turn, so he now has greater attack, and then he gets the skill 2 and proc into his skill 1. It can be crazy scary. He can cleave teams if you're not paying attention. And he does have a bit of a heal, which is kind of nice, but I guess most people don't use him for that. He could be very good for raid teams and stuff like that, but you don't see him all that often unless people are just having fun and memeing. But he can be very scary. Keep that in mind. Up next, we have Geither. Geither is one of the most underrated units in the game for very meme reasons. We won't get into that, but she hits crazy hard. She's got an amazing kit. I use her personally in my arena offense every single Sunday during Arena Rush, and I've used her to get legend pretty much every week. And very interesting kit in that the only unit in the game that can single target nuke, which is very important. So single target nuke, hold book so you can burn into somebody else, and provide attack buff for your entire team. There's only 2 other mages that can hold book that also provide attack buff. One of them being Vivian, who we haven't talked about yet, and the other one being Fire Era. And both of them cannot single target nuke or even really do damage on the turn they provide attack buff. So in that situation, Geither is OP. That's probably the only place I would use Geither, although I did use her early game in Raid and added a little bit of a heal to my raid team to get me through my first Hell raid clears. But other than that, I mean that's all you can say. What more could you ask for? I usually use her against Bassar comps. She's the one who one-shots Bassar, provides attack buff for my Lilibet, who can then go ahead and one-shot the Arby. Makes for a super smooth cleave team. If you want to see that, I will be streaming that on Sunday. On to the dark units, we have Troublemaker Crozet. Great tank. Provides a lot of stuns. He provides a lot of protection. I don't see a lot of people using him super late game, but he can be very good in Guild War and can be solid in RTA as well. Moving on to Rose, she's a unit who I'm keeping up this high because I feel like she could be very good in RTA. I'm sure a lot of people would argue I should move her down to B tier because she's not being used, but I feel like she has so much potential for RTA. I just don't have the molas to make her work, but I would love to see her. I'd love to see someone try her out in RTA and make her work because I feel like she could be good. Next, we have Kitty Clarissa. Kitty Clarissa, one of the best cleansers in the game. She does get a lot of play, especially in Hall of Trials, one of the better Hall of Trials units. She also has a strip, which is nice, and a guaranteed skill 1 team up. The skill 1 team up also skills up with the unit with the highest attack, which is really nice, unlike Lilius, who just teams up with somebody random. So you know who she's going to be team up with every time, which is really important. The problem with this is that she's not a heal. So she doesn't have a heal. She can't run heal artifacts. The positive about that is that she can run Strack. So if you're having a hard time against those debuff teams with like Moy, ML Era, Bassar, she can have the highest resistance out of any of the high resist units, which is great. So if you're only getting debuffed, she's your girl. Go for it. She's your best counter. If you can get high enough res on Acades, Destina, Ray, DJ Bassar, any of them, they might be better because they can provide a heal. Ray and DJ Bassar in particular, because not only do they provide the heal, but they also provide immunity. So after you cleanse, you're just not open to getting debuffed again, which is the big problem with Kitty Clarissa, is that yes, she cleanses, but then what? Moving on, we have Mlken. Mlken has dropped down this tier list steadily every single one we've put out. He just keeps falling down the tier list because there's just more and more things that counter him every single day. And people now know how to deal with him, and he's really on the list of units that need a buff. Next, we have Celestial Mercedes. Celestial Mercedes is a great AoE damage dealer. If you're running Bassar, Tywin, AoE damage, she's best in slot. Beyond that, she really has no use. You won't see her anywhere else other than that team, except for maybe an early game farmer. You could do that because she does have 2 AoEs, but that's pretty much it. I have mine on a Rage build. Like I said, Rage with Bassar and Tywin, best in game. But that's really the only spot you're going to use her. Next up, we have Angelica. I know a lot of people use Angelica. I built mine up. I've never actually used her yet. A lot of people are using her to counter Arby. I personally have a lot of other counters to Arby, but if you don't have like a Sigrid build that can counter Arby or a Lilibet or something like that, since Angelica is the next best option. Just bring her in, buff, and you're good to go. She does have a decent gear requirement though, so you have to be a little bit careful with that. But other than that, she's good to go. Then we have Fat Cat. Fat Cat is, or Assassin Cartusia. Assassin Cartusia has an interesting passive that annoys the hell out of me. I hate evasion in any game. He was ultra prominent in Arena for a couple of months where it was like you had to have him on your Arena defense. And then eventually people just started Kizeing those defense and he's died off again. You don't see him as much anymore. You can use him though in like Guild War offense. I know I use him on my baby account in Guild War offense all the time. I use him with my ML Ravi. So he goes first, defense breaks, and then she just nukes them. It's a nice combination. Outside of that, he doesn't get a lot of play, but against anti-cleave, if you're having a hard time with anti-cleave, he can be an option where you can just bring him in and you can pick and pray unit, as I like to say, where you can just pray that the enemy misses and doesn't get their cleave across. Then we have Dark Corvus, the last unit in the A tier, and the only other ML5 other than Ken on the A tier. Another one who I do think needs a buff. I don't know what they would do with him. I think he would need a bit of a rework. I know everyone loves him for Guild War. I just feel like there's better options. I never lose in Guild War, and I don't even have him on my account. I have him on my baby account, and I never use him. I just feel like there's always a better option. He is a good option if you are like outgeared or your early game and you don't have a way to kill a specific defense, and you have no other option. You can just play Project Protect Corvus, and eventually you'll win. But other than that, I'm not a fan. Moving up to the S tier. All right, Cerise in the water side. Wow, we're already 45 minutes into this. Try and keep this under an hour and a half if possible. Cerise is she's great in RTA. You probably won't use her anywhere else though. So, solid RTA unit. The restrict is huge against units like Oxlots. She also has insane base speed. She's very good at what she does. She's one of the best at what she does. She's one of the primary cleave counters in RTA right now, and most Legend players have a Cerise built, and she bails them out of sticky situations, myself included. She's got a stun. She's very good. She has a stun, a strip, restrict, a slow. She can solo teams because she's so fast. She generates her own turns and she slows the enemy. Plus her stun, I've seen her come back. She's had many 1v2 victories late in RTA fights. So keep her in mind. She has a lot of potential. Next, we have Tywin. Tywin is a unit that I debated dropping on this list because nobody really uses him anymore. You don't see a lot of Basar Tywin cleaves, but he is the best AoE defense break in the game and provides something that nobody else does. Sorry, thought my dog was getting in trouble. So I left him there, at least for the time being. We will have to see how he evolves over time, and we'll go from there. But again, best AoE defense break in the game. If you're looking to strip defense break nuke, he's your person. Up next, we have Lulu, and Lulu also has an AoE defense break, plus she's a mage, plus she has a defense buff, plus a shield, plus a skill 1 defense break, and nobody uses her. She does get some play in Wyvern 13, which is nice. She's a solid Wyvern 13 unit. But really, nobody's tried to make her work in RTA. I feel like with the right gear, she could be very good in RTA. I might try, if I had her skilled up, I might try building her for RTA. But for now, I hesitate dropping her down just because I think she has a ton of potential and she has a really good kit. Next, we have Lulu. Oh, wait, that's not Lulu. Hold on. We just talked about Lulu. Next, we have Elena. Elena, speaking of counter cleave, like Cerise, Elena is one of the top counter cleave units. She's great against a Rose cleave, and she's great against a Litiga cleave. Those are really her only two uses, and the only place you'll see her. But she is best in game at that because people generally will get cut if Elena's built properly. Moving on, we have Crow. And Krau's another one who a lot of people love. Similar to Dark Corvus, he's very painstakingly slow to use. I really don't like Krau on defense. You can make him work on offense if you're controlling everything. And I know a lot of people love him for defense. I am not one of them. The only reason he's not lower is because of the amount of people in top ranks that still use him. Although we were talking about this on stream today, and his use rate has fallen considerably. We did like 5 or 6 hours of RTA on stream today, and I think we saw him like 2 or 3 times the whole night. On to the fire units. We have Fire Ken, great bruiser, defense breaks, a lot of potential. I think he gets overlooked because he is fire and doesn't get used a lot. A lot of people just don't have him built, but he is still very good and very scary. Fireball, another one, amazing kit. We talk about how good Fire Tenebria is in terms of a mage. Fireball has almost the same kit. He also hits 2 units with his skill 1. He could be incredibly good if people were willing to invest molas into him. I think the reason people don't use him is because he kind of looks creepy and nobody really likes his art. I feel like Smilegate's gonna buff him again because they're just looking at the list and being like, oh, he's not getting used. We may as well buff him again, and he'll get to the point where he's overbuffed. When that happens, remember it was me that said it was gonna happen, but he has a crazy kit. He's got an AOE defense break, an AOE slow, an AOE heal block. He hits 2 people with his skill 1. He's got short cooldowns. He refreshes his own cooldowns. You name it, he does it. He's got a crazy kit, and he can do good damage. So I think he's definitely where he belongs. If anything, you could make a case for him to be higher, but since nobody's using him, we're going to leave him at S tier. Up next is Tamarin. Tamarin is the queen of raid, hell raid, regular raid. You see her in almost every raid team. Outside of that, she doesn't really get much use. There are still few people running Tam Izaria in arena, but not very many. And yeah, she's great at what she does, and that's about it. You also, and Hall of Trials, of course. Hall of Trials queen. Charlotte, she's moved way up this list. So I had Charlotte at B tier. She got her big makeover, and nobody really used her for a bit. But now that people have started building her, and we've started to see her potential a little bit more, it's nice to see her moving up this list. She is very scary and difficult to deal with in the right comp with the right gear. And I am seeing more and more of her as we go along here, and she can be very scary. Next, we have Acades. Acades is, again, one of the best cleansers in the game. She's got decent base speed, and she can cleanse every other turn. Some people will argue she's the best cleanser in the game. I particularly don't use her as much because I use Ray, and Ray cleanses with immunity. But I think Acades is very good, very, very strong. Also, being able to regen her own or reduce her own cooldowns is huge. Basically allowing herself to cleanse every other turn and keep herself alive in the meantime, she can be very annoying. And then another Fire Bruiser in Ravi, another unit similar to Charlotte and Ken that's very scary in RTA, scales very well late in games, and can potentially solo fights. So if you're looking for a Fire Bruiser and you don't have Ken or Charlotte, you can use Ravi. All 3 of them are pretty much interchangeable. Just keep in mind that Charlotte is AoE while the other 2 are single target. Moving on to the nature units, we have Vildred. Vildred is the 3rd best imprint in the game at 12 speed, but he has AoE damage, and very good AoE damage. He's one of the best cleanup units for an Oxlot's Cleave. You do see him sometimes in RTA if you need to get first turn. Like if say for example I bring Shuri, a lot of people will bring Vildred because he does have that 2 extra speed on his imprint, and it's worth it. That's also a big part of the reason why, coming back to the Cern, why I built Cern was because she has a better imprint than he does. So kind of everything trying to counter each other. Vildred's still very good though, and because of the fact that he not only has that AoE damage, but he procs an extra turn if he kills somebody, he can be the best cleanup unit possible for an Oxlot's Kize team. Speaking of speed imprints, we have Sid, regular Sid. still insanely strong. I've been using him in Expeditions. He's also very good in Hall of Trials, and he has a defense break, plus huge damage once he has a speed buff. A lot of people running him with Angelica for Angelica cleaves. I have seen him a little bit more this RTA season so far, which I find interesting. Maybe he's coming back into meta as people realize how crazy strong his AoE is. Then we have Lilibet, still one of the best anti-evasion units in the game. If you haven't built her, you should. Not only does he counter Vildred, but he's also, if you want to run her on Oath Key, she can help you deal with Rylet, and very comfortably so as well. That being said, you got to make sure she gets a turn before that Rylet goes. So for Arena, you could tank out the Rylet and then go Lilibet on Oath Key, but also very good in against Arby's or against any revive teams as well. Then we have Destina. Speaking of fantastic cleansers, one of my go-to cleansers is Destina. I use her all the time in RTA. I pair her with Ray. I put staff on her, and nobody lands any debuffs. And if they do happen to land any debuffs, then I have 2 cleansers there, and there's no way you're beating that. Her heals are actually really, really good, and I've been seeing more of Destina in RTA recently. She stays here for now, but she may end up moving up on this list, as potentially will Ray. Before we get to Ray, we're going to talk about Vivian. Vivian is a very confused unit. She wants to be a damage dealer, but then she has buffs only on her skill 3. That being said, she can be crazy scary if she gets her buffs off and gets her skill 2 off, which you can generate that skill 2 relatively easily if you run Dignus Orb. She can be crazy scary and just cleave teams. That being said, she's also relatively easy to counter. I have her built up right now, and she's a lot of fun, but when she fails miserably. And I don't know. I'm kind of torn on her. She's very, very good and can be very, very scary, but she can also be way too squishy to do the job. So keep that in mind. She's also one of the main units for AZ13 and part of my AZ13 team. She's probably the most used AZ13 unit in the game right now. And then we have Ray. Ray is potentially, we've talked about a lot of cleansers and a lot of crowd control unit counters. He's potentially the best one. Reason being, there is DJ Basar, who you can see is just over to the right of him. But Ray has better base speed than DJ Basar and awakens into 30% resistance. So it is easier to gear him than DJ Basar. Now, if you could gear them the same and get the same stats on them, theoretically, DJ Basar would be better because he has a boost. But are you going to get those stats? So if you're looking for the stats, you go Ray. If you're looking for the boost, you would go DJ Basar. Very similar units. I don't have DJ Basar, so I'm using Ray. If I had both, I don't know which one I would use. But I have my Ray pimped out at around 250 res, and he never gets stripped or debuffed, and he probably has the best win rate of any of my units in Legend RTA. Just all there is to it. Up next, we have ML Era. ML Era is the best crowd control unit in the game. If you're trying to run a crowd control team with someone like Moy and Basar, she is almost a must in the team. She has the best AoE stun in the game, and she's element neutral. And if you put her on Crown, she can potentially keep AoE stunning every single turn. So keep her in mind if that's what the type of team you're trying to run. She's also good in raid, but primarily crowd control offenses is her main forte there. Then we have DJ Basar. We just talked about him. Great cleaver because he has a cleanse, Great cleave counter because he has a cleanse with a push and immunity, which only him and Ray can do, except his has the boost. Very good, but like I said, he has less stats than the Ray, so you got to weigh your options there and figure out kind of which one you would prefer using. Then we have Crimson Armin, full team immunity plus invincibility plus damage reduction. She gets to keep her spot here, even though nobody really uses her anymore, because she does provide something that not a lot of other people provide, and that's kind of a big deal. So having her on there is important. you can still use her to counter cleave if it comes down to it. If people are trying to cleave you and you know they're going to ban your damage reduction, you can always bring her, and you'll most likely survive. Then we have Specimen Says. Specimen Says is so scary, but so hard to use. I feels like he fails a lot, but if he gets his skills off in the right comp, you're just dead. There's nothing you can do about it. He's just going to keep killing people over and over, and you can't revive them. You can't survive his damage. There's nothing you can do. He can be completely debilitating to your team, but he's also very hard to use, and that's why he's not higher on the list. Because he works so well with stuns, you don't need great stats on him. You can build him very tanky or very fast, depending on how you want, and he can be very good. But most times he gets banned anyway, and he does need setup in order to work, because you will need a strip, and you need a stun, and he needs to be speed tuned, all of which is very difficult to do in this game because of the speed variability, so keep that in mind. And resistance, of course. Then we have Sage Ball. Sage Ball, another unit that's very scary in RTA. He has a strip and crowd control, which can completely lock down your team. He is hard countered by FCC, who almost everybody has FCC now, which is kind of scary. A lot of people still calling for Sage Ball nerf, or sorry, Sage Ball buff. But if you've ever faced him in RTA, you know how scary he can be and how he's still a must ban a lot of the time. On to the dark units, we have Assassin Sid. Assassin Sid is one of the #1 counter cleave speed units alongside Cerise. It's probably those two are the top ones that I see in Legend RTA. He's a fast unit with crazy base speed that can also one-shot. So say I bring my Litiga Oxlots in, if I get outsped by the Sid, he just deletes somebody, puts up evasion, and odds are, because he deleted your fastest unit, you're also going to get cut on top of that, and your whole team is blown up. So you not only have to outspeed him, but you have to deal with him in a hurry as well, because if you kill somebody else before you kill him, he gets an attack bar boost, and you're going to get cut as well. So very good unit, top tier counter cleave. You probably don't want to use him anywhere else other than counter cleave, which is why he isn't higher on the list, but he's still very good at what he does. Speaking of which, Crescent Moon Rin. She's another one. Crazy base speed again. I forget what it is. I think it's 128 base speed. It could be 124 though. I can't remember. But very fast, and she can strip and she can stun. So she's run two different ways. One, counter cleave. She's run at like 300 speed as a counter cleave unit. People just run her fast because she doesn't require much mola investment, and they strip with skill 3, stun with skill 2, and it's GG. I don't think that's her best use. I think if you wanted a unit that could lock down a unit on first turn, you're probably either using Litiga or you're using Wanderer Silk. But she can fill that role if you want her to, and I see a lot of people using her that way. The way I like to use her is against like DN teams or against like a very high effectiveness strip that's slower on like a tanky build. You can even put evasion artifacts on her, and she can be very hard to deal with, especially when she's stealing buffs from like a Maid Chloe or a DN or even a Crow, somebody like that. Nothing crazier than seeing her with Oath Key and stealing the evasion from from a Rylet, which can be really scary, and putting up team evasion is ridiculous. But lots of fun can be had with her. She's not overly meta because she does get resisted a lot, especially if you use her on first turn, because you have to overcome the res check twice. You have to get not resisted with your strip and then not resisted with your stun. And at 15% each, it just seems like you get resisted way too often. But she's still a lot of fun to use. Moving on, we have Shooting Star Katie's. Shooting Star Katie's one of the better revivers in the game. Very, very scary if paired with the right units. But she gets overshone by Ruel and Maid. But still, she's a lot of fun. She's got a great heal. Plus, her death prevent is really strong as well. Then we move on to BBK. BBK, very strong. Cassius, go lay down. Go lay down. He's bugging me because I'm not supposed to be streaming right now. BBK, very strong AoE cleave unit. She also self-heals, plus a lot of people will build her like bruiserish for RTA. She can be very, very scary, but she's also can do huge damage. So make sure if you're going into a BBK, you know how she's built. If they're using it offensively, she will be cleave and she'll wreck you. Or if they're using her defensively, she could be like on a counter Dreamblade build and be very difficult to deal with. She also self heals and does more damage and speeds up as she gets faster. So she can be very difficult to deal with and a very strong unit. Up next, we have another speed-based damage dealer in Assassin Collie, one of the better speed-based damage dealers in the game. I get asked all the time who's better, Sid or Collie, and it's kind of a coin flip, depends how you're going to use them. If you're using it to counter cleaves, Assassin Sid is better. If you're using it as more of an offensive unit against single target damage dealers, then Collie is better because she does provide her own attack buff. Her burn damage is insane, it scales really well. And she can be fantastic against those kind of teams. Also, putting herself into stealth means she can't be hit. Whereas Sid just puts up evasion, which means he can be pretty easy to deal with. Even though he can evade a couple of times, that evasion is only 50% and it falls off after 2 turns. So I would definitely be more scared of Collie than I would be Sid in a bruiser fight, whereas I would be more scared of Sid than Collie in a cleave. And finally, for the S tier, we have Blood Moon Haste. Blood Moon Haste is a very good unit at countering Maid Chloe, and you can use him to counter Arby. Outside of that, he doesn't do too much, although I have been seeing him be used to try and counter Rylet, because he does do miss damage anyway. So he can potentially one-shot a Rylet if you let him through. But other than that, he's kind of niche, which is the only reason it keeps him coming higher on the list. But when he is in a spot where his niche is useful, he's amazing and can't be stopped. So moving on to the S tier. This is where we get to units that are basically OP in whatever their space may be anyway. So let's run through these. Starting from the left in the water units, we're going to go with DN. DN with the crit buff, attack buff, heal, shield, cleanse, and self-attack bar manipulation. Everybody knows how good she is. One of the most used RTA units out there. Very, very strong and very difficult to deal with. If you've ever tried to nuke people down when DN has her buffs up, you know how difficult that can be. And when that anti-crit works, you can't beat it. You're not going to get through that. That being said, it doesn't always work. Moving on, we have Dizzy. Speaking of debilitating units, she does the same thing except in the complete opposite way. She, instead of putting up anti-crit, she puts up blind and just locks you down that way. Once you're blinded and slowed and stunned, and she starts teaming up and landing crown stuns or violin strips, depending on how you got her built, she can just be completely debilitating as well. Very scary unit to face if you don't have immunity, and even if you do have immunity, they'd probably have her on violin, and she's going to strip it anyway. The only saving grace is that she's somewhat squishy and can be dealt with relatively quick, but if she starts cycling, you better look out because she's going to solo you. And another new appearance on the list, one of the newest units in the game, is Chu. And I've really been enjoying her. She's actually been a lot of fun. She's a great bruiser. I'm just currently trying to get some footage together to make a video about her specifically. I've been using her non-stop in RTA. With the crit buff, she's only the second unit outside of DN that provides the anti-crit. Also, she gives self-immunity, which is nice. And her skill 2 can actually do big damage. And I've had a few fights where she's soloed people at the end of fights, which is really nice. Especially because her skill 2, once you have max stacks, not only does it do more damage, but it also resets itself, which means you can do it twice in a row. So I've taken down like Dark Corvus with her because she just nukes, doesn't quite kill, but nukes, and then goes again, does her nuke again, and he doesn't have a chance to get all his stacks, and then he's dead. So very strong unit. I hesitated to put her up this high. I almost put her in the S tier just because she's not fully built yet, and a lot of people are kind of hesitating on her. So you could potentially move her down like half a tier just to be safe. but I kind of like her in that S tier, and I'm gonna leave her, or sorry, in the double S tier. So I'm gonna leave her here for now until we see, because I think she's got a lot of potential, and I'm not the only one. So we'll see how she works out moving forward. Moving on to the fire units, we have Lilius. Lilius is one of my least favorite units in the game because you never know who she's going to team up with, and it feels like she always teams up with a healer. That being said, a lot of people use her very, very well and very effectively. I wouldn't personally have her this high, but because she's so well liked and so like used so often, we have to keep her up at double S tier. I personally don't use her, but she's crazy strong. She's got a cleanse, she's got an auto team up, she's got a provoke. Um, One of the most used units in Legend RTA, and I wish I could argue it, but I can't. Moving on to Tenebria, the probably the next best crowd control unit in terms of like a crowd control team is Tenebria. The difference with her and what makes her so good is that she can be built tanky, plus she has her own defense break, so she can crowd control, she can generate her own turns, she can defense break, she can slow, she can sleep. Once she gets rolling, she's similar to Dizzy in that you just can't shut her down. Her self-attack bar boost is insane. She gives herself 50% if every single time she lands a sleep with her skill 1. So in case it didn't shut you down enough by landing sleep, she also is going to get another turn and reduce her own cooldowns because of it. So very scary unit, very, very good. The only thing that holds her back is that she is fire, but she can be built with crazy stats and can pretty much solo teams if she gets going. Finally, we have Kayron. So I know a lot of people love Kayron or hate Kayron, but either way, he's still meta because he can do things that nobody else can do, and that's what makes him high on this list. He can be a squishy cleaver and not die, which is very, very scary. So it's one of those things you got to deal with. You got to plan to bring a stun or crowd control or something to deal with him. Otherwise, he could potentially solo your team if you're squishy. But not much you can do about that. You just got to do what you do. And Cassius, stop. Go lay down. Man, he's being so bad right now. I he just can't leave me alone when I'm recording a video. So he looks so guilty. Can I show you this? Hold on. No, I can't. I tried to switch the camera so you could see it, but he's just sitting there being a pest. All right, back on track. Kayron, single target nuke, AoE nuke. He can have a single target, or sorry, he can have an AoE skill 1 damage, which is crazy. Like, but he should never be able to do that. That plus basket is insane. He always seems to proc greater attack, and if he does proc greater attack, he gets to keep it forever because his skill 3 extends his buffs, so he'll skill 3 someone with greater attack, kill them, get to keep it again. It's ridiculous. Plus, on top of that, you have chances to heal. It's unreal. Then we have Cecilia. Cecilia is I like to think Cecilia is the third best tank in the game. So being the third best tank in the game, the third best knight in the game, I put her just barely ahead of Lilius. She's got everything now. Now that she's got her new exclusive, she's crazy. She can hold Aureus, obviously. She's a knight. She now has a strip. She has AoE heal block, AoE provoke, which completely locks down a team if you run a strip in front of her, and she's got a defense break on her skill 1, and in case that's not enough, she can do huge damage. She does the same, you've all seen like damage FCCs. She can do like 5-6k AoE damage, which is huge when it comes to AoE fights. She's carried me through so many fights, I can't even express how good she is. The fact that people still, for some reason, don't think she's good makes no sense to me. Every single day, someone comes into stream like, "Oh, you're using Fire CC in RTA." I'm like, really? Like, she's one of the best units in the game. Why have people not caught on to this yet? But I won't build her up too much because I don't want too many people using her in RTA. But she's crazy good, and if you haven't seen her, you should definitely check out one of my streams so you can see how good she is. Up next, we have Charles. Charles is an interesting unit in that he's very much one of those pick and pray type units, but that makes him top tier for Guild War defense. He's still one of the best Guild War defense units in the game. He's not great in RTA because of that. He's very RNG. You pick him if you're behind in a fight and you don't think you can win, but he can solo fights. And if you run 4 AoEs to try and like Rose Cleave or something, if he doesn't die, he's gonna take 8 turns and Elbrus proc every single one of your 4 units and Smash proc every single one of those units, and he'll take 4 turns and fully strip your entire team without moving. And you know what happens. And it's infuriating when it happens, and it makes me pull my hair out, but that's what he does, and he does it well. And I think the artifact interaction is kind of busted, and I wish they'd fix it. But until they do, he's going to be that pick and pray unit that just gives the enemy that RNG chance to beat you. Up next, we have Izaria. Izaria, I think one of the more underrated units. Very strong, crazy kit. She's got defense breaks, strips. She's got cooldown reductions. She can do it all. People love Flurry, but for some reason don't like Izaria. It doesn't make any sense to me. I think Izaria is a better version of Flurry. She just doesn't give herself turn generation. But other than that, she's super strong. Can be geared many different ways. She doesn't need Izaria. She doesn't need Tam to be good. She's what makes Tam good. So keep that in mind when you're building your teams. I'm surprised we don't see more of her in RTA, but she's still crazy good. I definitely recommend building her. Then we have Euphine, one of the top nature damage dealers in the game. She can one-shot any water unit. One of the best Guild War units in the game in terms of just boosting and nuking. She can take multiple turns. She can kill multiple people. You might even be able to kill an Arby with her. I've never tried to kill Arby for sure if he was squishy, but you might not want to risk that. But yeah, very strong unit. Can completely lock people down. And she's got a strip as well as harsh single target damage, a stun, defense breaks, very scary. If you see her in RTA, you're probably banning her, even though you don't think she's good, because you just don't know how she's built and you don't know how the enemy's going to use her. I have been seeing her a little bit more in RTA this season already. I've seen a couple people with really fast Euphine builds, like 250 speed Euphines, that are built more bruiser-ish, but also with crazy speed. She can be very scary. All right, on to the ML 5 stars that everybody cares about. This is where they're all hanging out. You can see, actually, I don't know if I can change the view here, but you can see that at the bottom of this list is very sparse now, whereas the top of the list is getting a little more dense. I think it's a very good sign for the game. I know we talk about this on a regular basis, kind of where the game is heading, but I think it's a very good sign for the game that there's so many good units in this game. It's very well balanced. I think the biggest balance issue in the game is the artifacts right now, but I think the game as a whole, in terms of the units, the artifacts are very well balanced, and there's a lot of playable characters in RTA. If you just look at S to triple S on this list, like these are all playable characters in RTA and all characters that I see every single day in RTA. So keep that in mind. They do deserve credit when it comes to their character balance, as compared to most games, I think it's better balanced than most. So anyway, back on track. We have Judge Kize, the best AoE damage dealer in the game. If you're running AoE nuke damage with Oxlots, this is probably who you're running with him, unless you're running BBK. But if you have Judge Kize, you've probably switched, because not only does she do that crazy damage, but she also strips and has skill cooldown reduction. So if she doesn't kill you, she can reset your cooldowns. Not much more to say other than that, but she's definitely best in slot. Next, we have Maid Chloe, the second best reviver in the game. Very, very strong. The only reason she's not triple S anymore is because of Blood Moon Haste, who kind of brings her back down to earth, because he does so hard counter her. That you have to be very careful if you're taking Chloe in RTA, because if the enemy brings haste, you're in trouble. That being said, I have been enjoying using Chloe with Chu. A lot of people bring Dian, but if you want to bring a revive and a little more heals, you could go Chu and Maid, and you still get the attack buff and the crit buff. Granted, it takes 2 units, but you're also gaining a revive out of that, so keep that in mind. It's something I've been using Maid more now that I have Chu on the same team. Then we have Maid Chloe. Now we have LQC, Little Queen Charlotte, One of my favorite units in the entire game. She also hard counters all of these really hard to kill dark units over here, like Ravi, Rylet, um, Champion Zerato. She can even units like Rin and Sid and FCC as well. She's very, very strong. She hits incredibly hard. She scales really, really well in RTA as she's hard to kill. She can self heal. And because she can self heal and keep herself alive and be a built bruiser, she can make it to late RTA where she can just one shot stuff, which is really nice. Then we have Benevolent Roman, one of the most toxic units in the game. He can AoE every single turn and either blind you, stun you, or push you back. Who thought that was a good idea? I have no idea. His last buff was totally uncalled for. He was already really, really good, and I tried to express that in an earlier video, but they went ahead and buffed him again anyway, and now he is probably overtuned. The only saving grace is that he is squishy, and that makes him relatively easy to kill if you can survive him. I was actually tempted to move him up beside Basar in the triple S range because he can be so debilitating. That being said, he can be countered by high resistance, and if you're running high resistance, he does nothing. So that's kind of the way you got to go to deal with him. Either that or ban him. So element neutral also makes him very strong, where that's Basar's downfall. I couldn't decide if I want to move Basar down or Roman up, but most likely the first tier list of 2021 will have something done about that because he's crazy right now. And finally, for the light units, we have Tempest Cern. Tempest Cern is a unit that was on the list last quarter, but I actually forgot to mention her for some reason. I just brushed right over her. Can't brush over her this time. You see her all over the place in RTA and in Arena right now. Now, my thoughts on her is she's very, very good. Obviously, we've got our double S tier. That being said, I don't think she's going to stay at double S tier. I think she will drop as people get used to her and as people build teams that are counter her a little easier and really just know how she works. I think a lot of people still don't really fully understand when she cleanses, when she goes into stealth, that kind of stuff, and they make mistakes when they're facing her, which is what makes her very good right now. But as people get to understand that, I think she will drop back down to earth a little bit. So I would hazard against maybe going all the way with her, but she's still crazy strong right now, and for the time being, she's one of the best defense units in the game. Moving on to the dark units, we'll start with Apocalypse Ravi, and I still think she's one of the best RTA units in the game. I did, however, and to a lot of people's pleasure, moved her out of Triple S and down to Double S. In terms of arena, she's kind of fallen back a little bit. And in terms of Guild War offense, she's still OP, but in terms of defense now with LQC being such a hard counter, and evasion being so prevalent in the meta right now, she's just not used as much as she should be or as much as she was because of those options. Like people would rather bring Tempest Cern in because she can't get one shot, whereas Ravi can still get one shot. So she does have a revive, and she's insanely strong. And she's still, I think, one of the top 3 MLs in the game. But in terms of an overall unit, I did have to drop her down a little bit. Up next, we have Champion Zerato, and he is in the same spot, which is highlightable because he did get that quote-unquote nerf. It wasn't really a nerf. It was just a balance adjustment. He was doing something he wasn't supposed to do. Not a balance adjustment. You know what I mean. He was ignoring resistance on his skill 1, and he wasn't supposed to. So now he does the exact same thing he did before. If anything, in certain situations, it's actually a buff. Because he gets to keep that debuff, which means he will keep countering you over and over and over again. I think he's still very strong. He's in the same spot he was before, just as good, and very prevalent in raid and against debuff comps and Dizzy and all of that. Moving on, we have Oxlots. Oxlot's one of the premier offense units in the game for PvP. He's the best booster. He boosts with attack buff, 100% attack bar, low cooldown. Everybody knows how good he is by now. If you're trying to nuke somebody and you're trying to cleave, you're probably bringing him. Then we have CDOM. Speaking of cleave teams are still super strong. and that's why CDOM is up here. She can one-shot anyone in the game, plus she's an enabler. She will boost the rest of your team into a spot where not only are they going to get a turn, but they're going to have a crit buff. We talked about how strong Geither Aether can be. I run Geither Aether with 50% crit rate because my CDOM provides the crit rate I need in order to get the Geither Aether the crazy stats that she needs. So one of the best enablers in the game. Plus, she has one-shot capabilities. Crazy strong. If you're trying to cleave, those two units you probably are running side by side. Next up, we have Rylet, and for some reason, my Rylet picture is different than all the other ones, and I'm just noticing that now. I'll have to fix that for the next quarter, but for now, Rylet gets a unique spot. I debated putting him triple S a couple weeks ago. He probably would have been, but you've seen his usage just slowly start to drop a little bit as people get used to countering him, and kind of what I'm expecting to see from Cern. But I expect to see Cern drop to S eventually, whereas I think Rylet is pretty firmly set at double S. I don't see him going anywhere. There's a lot of Rylet counters out there and a lot of ways to counter him. As long as you're paying attention, you can deal with them. That being said, he can also solo you. And if things go right for him and he attacks the right person, there's nothing you can do about it. Also, if his evasion works, which is a bit of an issue. But he does crazy damage. He can be built crazy fast. And he can be crazy annoying to deal with by proccing 70% evasion over and over and over again. So he will probably never drop below this rank because of that, and makes him one of the hardest to deal with units in the game right now. And then we have Spectre Tenebria. I actually moved Spectre Tenebria up on this list. She was S tier last quarter. I decided to move her up on the list because people are using her more now that there's so many good single target damage dealers. Like you got LQC, Ravi, Rylet. All these units are single target, and she is the best single target counter in the game. So because there's more single target damage dealers, she has become better because there's less people being used to counter her. Also, with the use of SSB starting to drop a little bit, Spectre is higher on the list because of that as well. People are trying to avoid Elbrus counters and other counters like that by bringing single target damage dealers, and that's why they're bringing single target. So having something that counters that is always useful, which is why she gets to move up on the list. And finally, another new appearance on the list is Briarwich Izaria, and completely opposite to the trend of single target damage dealers and stuff like that, we have her who was basically brought into the game to counter Rylet. She can, however, be very good in Rose Cleaves, and she can be very good in RTA, and completely lock down teams with her Strip Buff Block and Attack Break. The only issue is it's not 100%, and she doesn't have a 100% chance to land on Rylet either, so if she misses, it's really unfortunate, but when it lands, she's OP. So I've been using her quite successfully. I've really been enjoying her. She definitely deserves her spot at this double S rank, and if you haven't faced a good Izaria yet, then you should take a look and see what she can do. One of my last videos I put out was with her, and she's been crazy strong for me. So definitely give her some love. She deserves it. And finally, our triple S tier. So these are, how many units do we have here? Top 9 units in the game. We will go left from right. If we had to pick a 10th unit to round out the top 10 units in the game, man, I don't know. I think if I had to pick 3, it would be Cecilia, Ravi, and Rylet would probably be those 3. Maybe Roman as well. I don't know. I can't. They're kind of in another tier. But these top 9 have kind of separated themselves from everybody else in the game. Starting with SSB, even though her usage has gone down a little bit, she's still insane. Like, she can still do things that nobody else can do. She can solo teams by herself without ever taking a turn, which is crazy. And she's a water unit, and she's using Wyvern. You name it, she does it. She's used everywhere. Basically, her interaction with Drink is what kind of makes her broken. Without Drink, she's not nearly as good, but she's still crazy strong. She should be triple S without it. she's kind of triple S plus with it, but people have just started building teams to deal with her. Immunity also deals with her quite well, so that's kind of why you don't see her as often. Up next, we have Sigrid, the best Wyvern unit in the game, best single target damage in the game, best way to deal with RB in the game, another triple S unit. Also, best way to deal with Tempest Cern. You name it, Sigrid does it. She's just ridiculous. Plus, the fact that she's water is mind blowing. How strong she is. Run her on Oath Key and she can still delete 2 units every game. She's the only unit that can kill both SSB and RB in the same turn. Or Cern and sorry, what did I say? I don't know. She's the only unit that can deal with SSB and RB, or Cern and RB in the same turn, which is any unit that can do that has to be triple S. Up next, we have Basar. Basar, even though Yufine came out, I thought maybe he would drop down a tier, but with Yufine being largely useless and nobody using her, Basar is still OP. No argument against him. He provides buff block, strip. He can be irresistible. He can also, if he gets his skill 2 off, can blind you and attack break you, essentially debilitating your entire team. And on top of that, he can hold Crown, which will also stun you. So keep him in mind if you're trying to annoy the hell out of people, because he's so strong, and he will apparently never get any weaker. Then we have Valencia, one of the, arguably the best bruiser in the game right now. Definitely one of the strongest top units in the game. She's the queen of RTA. You see her every single RTA fight. She has a strip. She's got big damage. She's got a defense buff, a defense break. She can single target nuke. She is... You could argue she's the best unit in the game right now. She's potentially the best RGB unit in the game. She's definitely one of the top 3. She's only one of only 3 RGB units that are triple S. So keep that, or 4, I guess, Basar. But he just won't stop bugging me. Yeah, very strong. She does need good gear, but once she's geared out, she's crazy strong. You can run her ahead of your debuffers as well as your strip, and yeah, don't overlook her. If you haven't built her, definitely build her up. I know a lot of people are hoping for an Valencia rerun because they skipped her the first time because they were busy listening to Reddit. But yeah, one of the best units in the game. Let's just move on. Next up, we have Rule of Light. Ruel is the best revive in the game, one of the most toxic healers in RTA because she does have the best base defense in the game, and with that base defense makes her very hard to kill come later in fights. She scales very well, plus the full heal, plus the revive, you name it, she does it. Very good unit. And she's another one you see almost every fight in RTA. Then we have Flitica. Flitica never needed her buff, but then they buffed her, made her basically triple S tier, and now she's just auto banned in every fight. Mainly because if Flitica tries to cleave you, you're gonna have a hard time, even with 2 bans, you're gonna have a hard time countering it. She can cleave pretty much anybody if she gets let through. She's basically a must ban at this point, but she's crazy strong. You all know what she does. She got a strip, a reset, plus the skill prevent, plus the attack bar boost, plus the self attack bar boost. And if that wasn't enough, she can also blind with skill 1. So crazy strong character, definitely deserving of her triple S tier. And one of only 2 units with Basar that is more of a support unit and doesn't really, she's not a bruiser, she's not a damage dealer. They're typically the units you see at triple S. A unit to be a support unit at triple S is very rare. So that kind of shows how strong they are. Moving on, we have Arbiter Vildred. Arbiter Vildred is he's definitely scaled down in his usage, kind of like SSB, but it doesn't mean he's not strong. It just means people have so many counters built for him because of how strong he is. But there are a lot of counters out there now, and a lot of ways to deal with him. As long as you're prepared to deal with him, you'll be fine. If you're not, he will solo you. So very strong. He does crazy damage. He also seems to proc greater attack with basket every single turn. That makes him very scary. And he can come back to life with full attack bar and ruin your day. So keep that in mind. And then finally, for the triple S tier, we have Fallen Cecilia, the best tank in the game. She's just crazy. She's everywhere. Everyone has her. She's on every single team, no matter what part of the game you're playing. In terms of defense, offense, any PvP, you have Cecilia, or you're trying to pretend you have Cecilia. And she just makes everything easier because of her crazy damage reduction with those shields. And I want to say that's it with the tier list, because normally you only go to triple S, but unfortunately we have one unit, actually 2 units that we haven't talked about yet. I forgot about Crow. I was going to talk about him in here. I left that spot for him and everything. Let's actually talk about Crow. If you're waiting for Tywin, hold yourself. All right. ML Crow, he's not even in the game yet. He's coming into the game this Wednesday. Where is he going to be on the tier list? Honestly, we don't know. So scrolling back up, let's take a look at this. I left a spot for him. He's either going to go here beside Cern or here beside Ball, or potentially where Tywin is, and we'll move Tywin up off the map somewhere. Because there's 2 things that could happen with Crow. One, he is a great counter pick and a great defense pick against AoEs and on defense against things like Judge Kize and against Firelitica, as he will counter both of those very, very well, regardless of anything else. So worst case scenario, he's a counter pick to those 2, and he falls in at S tier. Or his damage scales very well. He might not do great damage on turn 1, because he does auto miss. But by the time he gets his 3 stacks, which could happen in a Bruiser RTA comp, you could see Project Protect Crow comps, and he could end up being anywhere up to triple S, depending on how his damage scales. It could potentially scale to the point where, at like Frenzy 10, he could just AoE nuke an entire team, even if they haven't killed anybody yet. And that could be really scary. So we'll have to wait and see how his damage scales over time. But I would wait and see before you go too heavily to mull into him, because he'll be good either way. And I do think he'll be meta either way. At the very least, the very worst he could be is we see him on defense beside Fallen Cecilia, and you have to get through not only her shields, but his shields as well. So that is the worst case scenario for him. And best case, he's broken, and we potentially have him and Tywin in a league of their own. Speaking of Tywin, let's get this over with. I hate this guy. If I could have one unit in the game, it would be him. I don't have him. He's totally broken. The fact that you have a unit that steals souls, preventing you from doing things to begin with, he's tanky, can do good damage, and that's like the worst part of his kit, is ridiculous. So on top of all that, he also self-cleanses your entire team passively, plus he's got an AoE slow, plus he's got an AoE stun, plus it burns into only a 2-turn cooldown, which, because slow is so broken in this game, he can AoE stun and slow you. Because you're stunned and slowed, he will go again. He'll skill 1. Then because you're still slowed, he will go again, and he'll AoE stun and slow you again. And it's unending. As long as you have souls, he can permanently lock down any team in the game by himself and solo them. That should not be allowed. I don't care what anybody says. Anyone that I know that uses Tywin doesn't even disagree with me. They're like, yeah, he's broken. He's completely oppressive. He's bad for the game. He can just stun and slow everybody every turn, and there's nothing you can do about it. And he will just go on and win the fight by himself. Now, yes, he needs souls to do that, but like at that point, it's too late. There's nothing you can do. He's totally broken. He is the best unit in the game right now, by far. Not even close for RTA. Luckily, he can't be used all that many other places. He's still great on arena defense because of the cleanse, but he's totally busted in RTA. He's not broken anywhere else, but in RTA, busted. So that's going to wrap up our list for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, it will be posted on Discord on Wednesday. Please leave your comments and questions down below. I'll try and get to as many of them as I can. I do respond to each and every single comment for the first 24 hours of the tier list being released. So if you have a question, make sure you get it there then. Otherwise, jump into the Discord. You can ask me in the Discord. I will post the link to the Discord in the description and in the comment section. So if you want to join the Discord, you can join the Discord or jump in and talk to me on Twitch. Otherwise, I hope you all enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. This video does take a very long time to put together and a very long time to record and get up onto YouTube. So if you're not subscribed to the channel, I know we get over 20,000 views every single time I put out these tier lists. And we definitely don't have 20,000 subscribers on the channel. So if you guys could subscribe, it would mean the world to me. Thank you again so much. I really appreciate it. Have a great day, and we will see you all next time. Bye for now, guys.